Hello. I'm back with a fresh episode. It's been a long time. It's been over a year. I ended this podcast last year. In hindsight, it was somewhat prematurely. I thought I was done, but I wasn't. I was done at that time. And I didn't realize until much later, until the summer had passed, until I got into the fall, that this was a decision that I made kind of rashly. And in a way, it was me quitting on myself. In the moment, I usually batch my content, and I had gotten to the beginning of summer, and I hadn't really given much thought to how I was going to continue podcasting and topics and conversations that I was going to have. So I just shut the podcast down. And I've noticed this is a trend with myself and with other women. We quit on ourselves. We pause, we stop when something feels hard, or we don't have a plan, or maybe we had a plan and then it stops working, or it stops feeling right, or it just feels differently. Or maybe we haven't taken some time to think through the next steps. And I want to stop that for myself and for so many other women, because the only way we fail in life is when we quit on ourselves and when we stop. And there's so many ways to do life, whether you're struggling with something personal or you're facing a professional challenge. We've got to stop quitting on ourselves. We totally, really we just have to let that go. And so for the past year, I've spent a lot of time doing some soul searching and some digging. I'm not always, but I happen to work with a couple of coaches over the course of the past year. And I was spending a lot thinking about what's next for me. I'm in this phase, this area where my kids are about to turn 15, and today's the first day of school. So feels very symbolic that I'm filming this on their first day of school. So they still need me, obviously, and they need me a lot because they're a teenager and they've got teenage issues. But physically, they need me less. I'm not as tired as I once was when my kids were super little. All the moms out there with little kids, you can totally relate to this. I mean, those early years, you're just flat out exhausted. And when I'm physically exhausted, I cannot give space to mental and emotional issues, definitely not mental issues. And so now I'm in this place where I've got more mental bandwidth. I definitely have physical bandwidth, and I have the emotional bandwidth too. And I was trying to figure out what was next for me, hence the name of this podcast. And when I started this podcast last year, the title was Where to Next, because it was more of a question. And for me, I'm coming back because I know where I'm going. And I have a feeling a lot of you do too, whether you want to admit it or not. And those are part of the conversations that I want to be having. As women, we find ourselves in this place, this sort of midlife phase. And if somebody could please come up with a more pretty, more attractive, more sexy, if you will, sounding title for midlife, please, you could make millions, literally. That's sort of the phase I'm in, because I've done a whole bunch of stuff. I'm 52. I've done my 20s, 30s. I've done my 40s. I'm very clear on what I like and what I don't like, although I'm very also open to having a ton of new experiences because, hello, I'm only 52. There's a whole bunch of stuff I still want to do in this world. But all of that to say is, you're in this place. Maybe you can relate to this. You find yourself in this moment, like I said, where you have energy and you have bandwidth. And maybe you're thinking, oh, wow, I left a career 10, 15 years ago and I want to go back, or I want to go back and I want to do something. Or maybe you have something that's great that you've been building, that you've been working on for the past 10, 15, 20 years, and you want to burn it to the ground, or you want to walk away. I know somebody who just started an interior design business because that's what she always wanted to do. And her parents said, no, you can't go to school for interior design. You have to go and you have to become an accountant. So she did. She lived in the business world for a very long time. And she just said, no, I'm done. I don't want to do that anymore. So whatever it is, you've got this thing that you want to go and do. And here's where it gets good. You're not starting over. I hear a lot of women say, oh, I don't want to start over. It's just too tiring, or I don't want to have to go back to the beginning. You're not going back to the beginning. You're wherever you are. You have a wealth of knowledge, expertise, intuition, wisdom, and that matters because you can't unknow what you already know. You're never going back to your 22-year-old self, no matter how hard you try. And no matter which capacity you're trying to get back to her, she doesn't exist anymore. And I know that can be hard for a lot of people to hear, but it's actually a beautiful thing because who you were at 22 pales in comparison to who you are today. I saw this thing yesterday. I wish I had kept it. The younger version of you, or who you were in your 20s, thinks who you are today is a badass, or that person who you were in your 20s would think current you today is a badass. And yes, that's absolutely true. And I want you to start thinking that way and realizing, oh, well, yeah, I love my 20-year-old self because I did. I loved my 20-year-old self, but gosh, she really thought she knew so much and she didn't. And who I am today, I want to take care of that 22-year-old self. I want to bring her to where I'm going on this next part of my life's journey, whatever that looks like. So what does this iteration of the podcast look like? Well, we're going to have some solo episodes because it's me and here I am. We're going to have lots of interviews with women who've done an about face, whether it's they've had a career shift or a major pivot, or they've had a Phoenix rising story, whatever it is. I want to have those conversations because I want to normalize starting again in midlife. I want to normalize leaving something that you spent a long time building just to start over, because I want to normalize having a new chapter, having a new book, having an entirely new set. I'm going to date myself, set of encyclopedias on your shelf just because it seems like fun. There's a concept that I've been embracing, trying to teach my kids, and it's about, you want a great life. Go seek responsibility, go create adventures for yourself, because that is really where you tap into who you are as a person. You tap into your edges. That is where you grow. That is where you expand. And none of that is inherently comfortable. And we're living in a time when risks are, everything we do is out there in the open, and people can comment on at any moment. And so the thought of starting over, or the thought of taking a risk, or the thought of doing something where we don't inherently feel super comfortable or super masterful can be unappealing, let's just say, or unattractive. But I want to challenge that, and I want to change that whole construct. The people who are lighting the world on fire, like setting the world on fire in a good way, the movers and the shakers, those are people who are taking chances, who are constantly stepping outside their comfort zone, who are not afraid to have a misstep or two or three or a failure along the way. They just keep going. And I want to have conversations with those women because we can learn something from them personally and professionally, and just about life. I also am going to do some coaching with listeners. And what that looks like is, I'll tell you about that when it's time, but that is a straight up coaching session. Maybe it's a snippet of a coaching session, but we'll talk about that later on. You have everything you need right now to go and do whatever it is you want to go and do. You have gifts, you have talents, you have skills, and I bet I know you. I know you know what a lot of those are. And maybe the thought of taking a big chance or a big leap is overwhelming. That's fine. You don't need to take a big leap, but maybe you could take one small step. And so, practically speaking, before I wrap this up, I want to leave you with a couple of ideas that you can do after listening to this podcast. One of my mentors always says, she's said this to me for a very long time, Stacey, the only way is through. We cannot go around. We cannot avoid. So what's weighing on your heart, what's not weighing, but what's tugging on your heart, those intuitive hits, like me with this podcast, right? I thought I was done, but it kept coming back because this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing right now today for this season. There's a magical sentence in there, for this season, whether it's 6 months or 3 months or a year or 5 years. We don't know. The seasons are constantly changing. But when you're listening to yourself, when you're tuning in to your needs and your wants and your desires and that little voice inside you, she is going to give you all of the information, all of the nudges, all of the pings, all of the intuitive hits that you need. Okay? Remember, you're not starting over. You're here today. You're going to keep going. Now, the 3 things that you can do, I want you to tap into your intuition. And before you say, I don't have that, she's not talking to me, I don't know what you're talking about, it's absolutely not true. She's talking to you all the time. Maybe you're not paying attention, or maybe you're not realizing that it's her, or maybe you're ignoring her. Your intuition are those things that you kind of know, you kind of feel. Sometimes it does feel like a little voice inside of you. And if you're not having a regular conversation with her, I just want you to get in the habit of doing that. I want you to sit quietly and I want you to ask her a question. Say, hey, what do you want me to know? Hey, what's next? Or even start with something simpler like, hey, what should we have for dinner? Or what are we feeling like? Do you want to wear the brown dress, or do you want to wear, the orange dress? It can also help to give her two choices, but start having a conversation with her. Listen, acknowledge her, and thank her when she's talking to you, because she likes to be acknowledged like we all do. She'll show up more when you acknowledge her. The next thing you can do is phone a friend. Phone somebody from your professional career that you haven't talked to in 15 years. Go in your LinkedIn profile, if you have one, and find somebody you used to love working with. Or, I don't know, maybe you have a mom friend who you haven't talked to in a couple of years. Get out of your comfort zone and start having conversations with other women. Check on them. What are they doing? Hey, what's up? What's new in your world? Have a conversation, because when we get out of our comfort zone, I mean, that's where all the beauty is, right? But there's no safer way than calling someone from your past, somebody you used to know, somebody you admire. I mean, we're all online all the time. Slide into someone's DMs, somebody that you have a girl crush on, somebody you follow. Hey, I love what you're sharing with this world. This message really resonates, and start a conversation there. See what happens. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to dream. I want you to go on a walk and imagine if there was no limit, if your life wasn't what it is today, where would you be? What would you be doing? And I want you to allow yourself to really go there, because maybe some of what you're missing is some of what you dreamt when you were little, but maybe some of those dreams don't hold true anymore. And you can ask yourself, you can ask your intuition. A lot of times I will say, oh, is this an old dream, or is this a real, is this current? And you'll be able to feel into that, because again, who I am today and who you are today is not who you were 10, 15, 20 years ago. So some of those things that society told you should want, or some of those things that your friends or your family or your parents or your mentor said, you know what, you're really good at that. I can see you doing that. Maybe you've been there and you've done that, but it's not resonating. So go and dream. And the last thing I want you to do is, if you're feeling stuck and you just can't get out of your own way, I want you to go and be creative. And I don't mean painting unless you love to paint, or maybe you've always wanted to paint. You could start doodling. You could take a drawing class. You could buy one of those lettering handbooks and learn how to letter draw. You could bake. You could go into the garden. You could just literally put your hands in dirt and plant some flowers, whatever it is, but anything that allows you to be creative. And the reason why that's important and that will make a difference is because you have a whole bunch of ideas and energy stuck inside of our bodies. That's just how it works. We'll definitely talk about that in a later episode. But anytime you can be creative and express yourself, even if it doesn't make sense, even if you're no good at it, and quite frankly, you're not going to be good at it. I don't even want you to be good at it. That's the whole point, is to not be good at it. The point is to go and express and to get this energy out. When we're creative, parts of us that we don't even know, that we are unable to access, that we've never even met, get expressed. And those can become ideas. Those can become things. They can become new bits of yourself that you've never met and that you've never had a chance to interact with. And that can be clues to what's next. Or maybe it's just art for the sake of art. Go do that. Have fun. And as you're out there in the world having fun, think about, who do you want to listen to? Who do you want? If you had your wish, what interview would you like to hear? Because I'm compiling a list. I have a whole note in my phone of people that I want to talk to. And it could be your best friend's mother's daughter, because she just started a new, makeup company. Or maybe it is a supermodel that you always admired from the 90s or 2000s. I don't know. Let me know. Send me an email, Stacey@staceyv.com, and we'll put that on the list. You never know. And the last thing I want to say is thank you so much for being here. Some of you are OG followers from the first podcast way back when my friend Sarah and I had a podcast. Some of you are brand new, and some of you are sharing this, and some of you are thrilled that I'm back. And for every single one of you whose space I was just hanging out in, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to be back.